and welcome to StartSmart Demo Pitching Night. It's great to see that StartSmart is still popular, that you all are here. We might have even some unique visitors. Of course, Mike is unique, but maybe some others as well. During the year, we have had 500 unique visitors on our events, so probably
over 600.
Over 600 already. Okay, we had a summer camp event a month ago or so. So we have even more than 600 unique guests. But tonight, I think you know what's going to happen. We have a pitching night. We have five teams who would like to pitch. And you all have 5 minutes. And after that, we have 5 minutes or more for questions and answers. But today, we have a special guest. We have Mike Arkin from US. And he has been a game developer. I have heard that he has developed more than 200 games in his career. So he has been really busy. And he would like to talk us about himself and what he has done over the years. So let's hear him, let's ask him questions, and after that, let's pitch. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Mike, are you ready? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna give you a mic. I don't know, that's the most suitable place for it. So, okay.
Hello, can you hear me? So first I apologize, I'm extremely jet lagged. I flew in Sunday night, and it's the middle of the night for me. I wrote this last night at 2 a.m., so I may have actually been sleeping while I was writing this, so it may be all complete garbage. So good luck. If any of this makes no sense, just smile and nod, and I promise in about a half an hour I will go away. I'm just going to basically talk about what I've been doing for the past 20 years. I understand that there's I didn't really know what the kind of program was, so I know there's an emphasis on kind of entrepreneurism and startups. I don't really talk too much about that, but maybe at the end I might throw some things in to make some of what I'm talking about slightly relevant. Thank you. She's taking pictures so I can post on Facebook. So this is my story. And as I call it, it's the story of my career and how I've kind of stumbled through, perhaps in a non-optimal way, but yet, 20 years later, I'm still getting called to speak in front of large groups. So that's kind of, I think everyone's goal should be to kind of get to that place. My name is Mike Arkin. I'm kind of an entrepreneur and a 25-year veteran of the game industry in America. I started a company called Acclaim in the late 80s. Acclaim, if you've never heard of them, was the first kind of independent game publisher for console games in the United States. They were founded by a couple of ex-Activision guys, and they had a very unique business model that allowed them to be extremely successful very quickly. So I started, people ask me all the time, how did you get started in games? And it's a completely non-repeatable story, because I walked into the company off the street and I didn't even know what they did. They told me they made video games, and I said, oh, can I have a job here? And they said yes. So again, there's no part of that any of you can ever actually repeat. I think it's just a very lucky situation. They hired me as a phone support, which was very popular back then. Any game company you could call and say, I'm stuck on level 7, what do I do? And I was the guy that would answer the phone. As it was a very small company, I basically did a little of everything, and then I grew within the company very quickly. I worked there for about 6 years, and during that time I shipped about 60 titles as a producer. So that was fun. And after Acclaim, I've worked at Sony, 20th Century Fox, which had a game division, Activision, who I think some of you have probably heard of, and an American publisher called Crave, which was a very kind of prolific publisher in the late 90s. I was producer on, as I said, about 200 titles, including all of the wrestling games at Acclaim, The Simpsons, Die Hard Trilogy, which was a very successful game, and Ultimate Fighting Championship, which was also a very successful franchise. Also, this isn't really true anymore, but at the time I wrote this, I was playing World of Warcraft, so in gaming circles, this slide always gets a big laugh, so just going to keep going. Wrong audience. Yeah, as I said, I basically wandered in off the street. The company was 5 people. I was employee number 7. I was 18. I basically was a college dropout. I had no idea what I wanted to do in life, but having wandered into a video game company, I thought, I want to do this. Actually, I was waiting for about 5 minutes, and the president of the company was on the phone, and he was telling his friend that he couldn't decide if he should buy a BMW M6 or a Mercedes SL. And as an 18-year-old driving a Toyota Tercel, I thought to myself, I would like to have those kinds of choices in my life. And I really want to work here because clearly, this is a company where you'll have those kinds of choices. I never ended up with either one of those cars, but the common theme, throughout my career is I made a lot of really stupid mistakes, and I'll try to, highlight a bunch of those. And I was also extremely lucky. And again, luck is not something that's easily repeatable, but throughout my career, I've just kind of stumbled into some very interesting situations. Just working at Acclaim right off the bat was, an incredibly lucky thing for me. And being that I was the only person at the company that could play games, I was kind of like a, instant celebrity within the company. So it led to a lot of, fun. This was, the late 80s was an incredible time for retail video games. This was it was like a gold rush. The money was being made left and right. Every game we did sold, 2 to 5 million units. Today that is, unheard of, and this is 25 years ago. Those numbers were insane. The company was making so much money, they didn't know what to do with all the money. And honestly, I'm not even sure if we put games in the boxes. Again, in gaming circles, that usually gets a laugh. But what happened back then was the name and the picture on the box was what sold the product. So it didn't matter what was inside the box, honestly. It was incredible. So Acclaim actually started by picking up Japanese product and just republishing it in the US. So their cost of development was 0, and that made for a very profitable business strategy. And like I said, games would sell 3 to 5 million units without any effort at all. And then, I don't know if this is interesting if you don't know the company, but Acclaim made a lot of money at a time where product quality was irrelevant. So again, we made a Rambo game. People would buy the Rambo game because it said Rambo on the box. There was no way for them to know what was in the box. There was no internet. There were no video game magazines. There was very little word of mouth. So your game could be of absolutely poor quality and you would still sell 5 million units. A large percentage of those games were being purchased by mom, grandma, and mom and grandma typically do not buy the game that you want. So, if you want Call of Duty, grandma will see some, cute character on the box and buy you that game. And today that is probably a very small percentage, but back then I think that was a very, very high percentage. And again, that contributed to the fact, we were able to sell 5 million copies of crappy games. Eventually, they never recognized the value of product quality, and they continued to focus on, low quality products, and the market matured, and Acclaim came to an end. As I say, maybe they saw the asteroid hit. You know, the analogy is the dinosaurs. But it was too late. And then, you know, they were an awesome example of a company that could have been, as we say, good to great. And, you know, they were one of the most successful, one of the most profitable video game companies at that time. And they never made a transition into greatness. Instead, they, you know, had a rapid decline and bankruptcy. So after Acclaim, I worked at Sony for a while. This is, you know, where I learned that working at one of these big first-party game companies was not so great. It was a monstrous company. We used to call Sony soon only not yet. It was a little internal joke because they moved. So it would take a year just to get a project greenlit, which was ridiculous. And this was probably the first time that I thought to myself, I don't want to work for big companies ever. I did it a couple more times after that, but after Acclaim, after Sony, I went to work at Fox, where I produced the game Die Hard Trilogy, which sold about 3 million copies. And again, the boom days were over, so at that point, this was an incredibly large number, because no one was doing those kinds of numbers at that point. This is where I learned it was great to produce a multi-million selling game. It's really good for your career to have a big success like that. And it was a really fun project to work on. If I had more time, I would have put pictures in the PowerPoint, but I worked in the building that was the building from Die Hard. So if you've ever seen Die Hard, it's Nakatomi Plaza is actually, you know, 2121 Avenue of the Stars. It's called Fox Plaza. It's actually the headquarters for 20th Century Fox. And it is exactly the building from the movie. I mean, everything from the movie was shot in that building. So, and I still, for the record, I think Die Hard is one of the best movies of our generation. So, is there anyone who has not seen Die Hard? Okay, good. I was just going to make fun of you. So, having produced such a successful game, I was recruited by Activision, and I tried really, really hard not to get the job. I didn't show up for the interview, which, I don't know, I just thought that was funny. Again, I was kind of young and stupid, and they kept calling me. And I thought, not showing up for the interview was, you know, how else could I not get the job? But they kept calling me and saying, please come here, come here. So I went to work there where I produced a game called Battlezone. And this was an awesome lesson for me because this was a game that reviewed 5 stars, you know, out of 5, 95%. It was one of the highest rated games at that time and still one of the highest rated games I've ever worked on. The marketing message was completely wrong, and the game sold almost nothing. And this was very, very confusing to me at the time because to have a game that was so highly rated, and we were on the cover of, just as a coincidence, I'm wearing the t-shirt, Next Generation magazine, which was a very popular magazine at the time. To have a cover, to be so highly rated, we were a groundbreaking, you know, new genre of gameplay, and then to sell almost nothing. Later, I started to think that perhaps it was because the marketing message was totally wrong, and I wasn't responsible for that, but I didn't do anything to change that, and I should have. So the great part about this is I walked into this job with absolutely no idea how to produce an internal team. It was very different than what I'd done for my entire career. And I had kind of forgotten to tell them that I didn't have that experience. So I got there with literally no idea how to do the job. And it was a disaster. I mean, I literally just had no clue what I was doing. But I had a contract. So they couldn't fire me. And it was a great example of how you can just completely fuck up, but learn a lot. So by the end of the project, I had about half an idea of how to do it. And that was a fantastic experience at their expense, but it was still a great experience. So I encourage you, if you have a job that you want to do, you don't know how to do it, just do it anyway. You'll learn something before they eventually fire you, which in this case took about 1.5 years. So I thought it would have been like 6 months, but big companies move slow. So from there, I did a license deal with Crave, and I went with the deal to work at Crave as an executive producer. for all of their products. Crave was like kind of a C+, kind of what that means is in English, kind of a low quality company. You know, there was a lot of lessons there that we did a lot with no money. Crave was completely underfunded. They basically had no cash, and we shipped, you know, 100 titles. And I worked on the first UFC game, which was, you know, regarded as one of the best fighting games on Dreamcast. So I passed on a game called Battlefield 1942. Are there any gamers in the room? Again, some of this stuff really gets laughs in the game developers. Okay, there's one guy in the back. Do you know Battlefield? Have you heard of it? Yeah. I didn't personally pass on it. The company passed on it. I was thumbs up. That game went on to sell like 20 million copies. It's probably one of the top 5 gaming franchises in the world. And you know, as I say, I hope I never learn that lesson again. So that was by far one of the greatest fuck-ups I've been involved in. So when I left, this is where it gets a little more entrepreneurial. So when I left Crave, these slides are in the wrong order, I think. Okay, so there was a company called Zona. It was run by a friend of mine, a guy named Novak. And he asked me if I could help them work on doing biz dev, basically. And I thought to myself, well, my entire career, I have signed developers for multi-million-dollar projects, and now I'll just be the guy on the other side of the table. It's the same conversation. How hard could it be? I'm doing the same thing. So, you know, I actually said, I really said this to him. How hard could it be to sign deals for a company? It is, in fact, very hard. So it is a great lesson in life that giving people money is a lot easier than asking people for money. So they were doing this Alien versus Predator game, and it took me about a month or so to realize that the game was a disaster and would never ship. And it wouldn't matter if I signed them a deal because they were going to go bankrupt. So I hired myself as a producer, which, again, if you can ever go to a big company and hire yourself, this is a really good move. Because they had hired me as a kind of business guy, and the first thing I said was, you're going to hire me. Renegotiated their deal with Fox to get more money, and I got the project back on track and shipped it. And then basically around that time, I became the CEO, and I kicked out the other 2 partners and became owner of the company. I didn't really kick them out. They left voluntarily. But I was telling the story this morning to someone, and he said, yeah, but how did you get all the equity? I said, well, when they left, I asked if they would leave me their equity, and they both just said yes. And so, okay, the lesson here is if you have equity in a company and someone asks you to give it to them, you should say no. But if you're ever in a position where you can just ask someone to give you their share in the company and they say yes, that's usually a good thing. Again, this is an unrepeatable set of circumstances. I was just extremely lucky that these guys were just in such a hurry to get out. They were like, I'll sign anything, whatever. So this is a very different approach to being an entrepreneur, just kind of taking an existing company and just taking over. I guess it's kind of like on Wall Street, you do like a reverse merger and just back your way into an existing company. But it was something I'd always, kind of wanted to do. So at that point, and I don't know why these slides are all out of order, but we had finished this Aliens game and I had to go find work. So in game development, all of your costs are people, and that people are very, very expensive. And so you live from deal to deal. Okay, you get a deal for a 6-month game, your company has a 6-month lifespan at that point. And at the end of that 6 months, you have another deal or you're out of business. And not everyone understands this, and I had an argument with my dentist once because he was like, you're just a bad businessman. You should be able to save your money. And it was like, no. When you're hired for a game, the publisher will pay you literally like exactly how much money it costs to make the game, and there's nothing left over at the end. And they try really hard to make sure that there's nothing left over at the end. So I was out there trying to find work for the company, and it was very, very hard to do. And the team didn't have great, track record, and not really like great experience. And as I say, it was a miracle we actually survived for about 4 years after that. Most game publishers didn't return phone calls. And this was very hard for me because I had spent my whole life, I was a producer at Sony. I could call anyone and tell them, come for a meeting tomorrow, and they would get on a plane and they'd show up. And I'm not exaggerating, when I was a producer at Fox, I could use my business card to get into restaurants, or to get to the front of the line for a table at a restaurant. Most people, the card made it look like I was a movie producer, so that's a different story. But I may have encouraged that belief slightly. But to suddenly be a poor developer that no one wanted to talk to was it was very shocking. It took a few months for that to kind of soak in. Why are people not calling me back? I don't get it. Publishers would make meetings and not even show up. Again, this was very confusing for me because I had never imagined not showing up for a meeting. We were a 15, 16 person team, which nowadays is actually like a big team by mobile and social standards. But back then, people wanted to sign 35, 40 person teams. It was thought that if you were 15, that was too small that was PlayStation 2 or so, where like a 30-man team was kind of the sweet spot. So, this is, I think, one of the great lessons that I learned, which, making games is really easy. I mean, if somebody handed me $1 million right now, I could go make, 5 games, and with no problem. But getting people to fund them is the hard part. And I think that, there's some things at the end I can talk about in terms of how that's getting easier, but it is maybe applicable to other businesses as well. Really getting people to give you money is hard. And I wish it wasn't so. So later I signed the kind of budget titles, which is not really great for the long-term success of the company, but it allowed us to continue staying in business. So we did about 5 titles for Activision, which were we call budget, which means very small development budgets and very low quality games. And then finally, it took me about 5 years, but I was actually able to sign some real work. And again, I didn't really know anything about how to do this kind of business development for a game studio, which is, again, typical of my career. Is I did a lot of things that I had no idea how to do. But a lot of stupid people continued to give me these opportunities to learn on the job these kinds of jobs. So we were doing a game based on Curious George, which was basically the budget was about half what it should have been, and the team was too small, and the project was canceled after about 6 months. And that was basically the end of the company. But in the middle of that, I got acquired. An old friend of mine was running a casual game company called Mumbo Jumbo, and so I negotiated a deal for them to acquire our studio and allow us to continue as their LA studio. So we can stop. I only wanted one picture. So what was really interesting was that all the experience we had doing casual games allowed us to work on, the experience we had doing budget games was very relevant to casual games, which was this new thing that was happening in 2006, which are these small, easy to play games, which are mostly played by middle-aged women. And the audience for casual games is very, very large compared to hardcore video games, which is what I've been doing all my life until that point. The difference is they have very high production value, but they're like a very small focused game mechanic. If anyone's ever played Bejeweled, Bejeweled is essentially like the first well-known casual game. So we worked on a game called Luxor, which is also kind of a well-known PC casual game. Luxor sold millions of units. We did console versions of Luxor. Seven Wonders is another game. And, so I say all of this kind of small polished games with a small team is very familiar sounding because 5 or 6 years later, this is basically the model for mobile and social games. And again, my wording is very vague because I'm used to a different crowd. So after 2 years, they closed the studio and fired everybody about a week before Christmas. If you're ever in a position to lay off an entire company, and it's like a week before Christmas, you might want to just like wait a week. I don't know, I'm just saying. It was like the day of the Christmas party. So, just hang on for 1 week. It's cool. It's a new year. You can be like, Happy New Year, you're all fired. It sounds so much better than Merry Christmas, you're all fired. I'm just saying, if any of you were ever in that situation. So we had basically shipped about 13 games in about 2 years with a 13, 15-man team. That's an amazing accomplishment. That is in spite of all of my efforts to fuck all this up. I had a really good team of people. And I think there's another lesson there, which is that for any company, Apple will tell you that their IP is their value, but the truth is your people are your real value. As a CEO, I was zero without all of every man on that team was kind of what made everything we did that was successful happen. So, and the fact that we were able to ship 13 titles in 2 years is amazing. So I actually skipped over one company that nobody cares about, but so after all that kind of came to an end, I said, okay, well, I'm tired of working for other people. It's time to be, independent again. So I started a company called Big Boat. It's a pun. I don't know if it works in Estonia, but my name is Arkin, and I tried to start a company called Arc Interactive, which kind of has my name. And apparently Mattel had a trademark that was very similar. So the lesson there was do the trademark search first. Don't make the logo first, because you spend a bunch of money on the logo only to realize that that's not trademarkable. So, so Big Boat was like a pun, because the Arc, Big Boat, anyway. We are a virtual studio, which means I have an office in my house and I have contractors around the world. We're basically going to ship our 9th title in about a month. So I don't even know what the slides say after this, because this is the part I was doing last night at 2 in the morning. Okay. So our specialty is we're very agile. And with 25 years of experience, putting some of that to bear on game development, I'm able to do things very quickly. And so I've done a lot of 1 or 2 week prototypes, which is paid work. And we work with a game engine called Unity, which is a very easy to use set of tools. And again, back to the being flexible, being agile, having tools that are created and are ready to ship is a big plus, because then you're not creating technology while you're trying to create content. You never want to do those things at the same time. That is the reason why a lot of game projects fail, is you try to create technology and game content at the same time. So we also have some augmented reality experience, and AR is something that everybody's very interested in lately. So and we're very inexpensive as a team, because as a virtual studio we have no overhead. For a while, I thought that our long-term strategy would be to have a fancy office with a beautiful secretary and free coffee. But I realized that I kind of really like being virtual and working from my house. I do most of the time work in my pajamas, and that's cool. So there's some downsides. There are some very, very big downsides, and I should have made a slide about it, but I didn't. There are some huge downsides to being virtual. Clients can never come and visit. I do have clients that think that I have this big fancy office somewhere, and I encourage that belief. But if asked directly, I say, no, look, we're virtual. We don't have an office. The other downside is people working remotely is great from a cost standpoint, but it's very inefficient, and it's very, very hard to get rid of those inefficiencies. So I can't lean over and say to someone, make that look like that. You just can't do it. So, but the overhead is I mean, the savings in overhead basically is my salary. So I like that. Also, I do production consulting. So occasionally I get pulled in as what I call as a cleaner. So, you know, if a project is in big trouble or they need someone with a lot of experience, that's good for me. Also, I occasionally get called as an expert witness, which is also incredible work. If you can be an expert in any field, do that. They pay you an enormous amount of money to go into court and have an argument with someone, which is something I usually do for free. If anybody wants to argue, see me later. And then occasionally I do this kind of stuff, which I'm trying to do more of. I'm actually here in Estonia for a week through GameFounders. They've asked me to say their name a few times. That's GameFounders. Where's the camera? GameFounders. And I'm not paid for that. I just I want to kind of give something back to the game community, which I haven't done enough of. So I'm trying to do more of that. And so, you know, I thought, well, what are some of the lessons learned? And I started this thinking I was going to talk about all the things that I fucked up throughout my career, and then I forgot to actually talk about some of that, which is probably good because I don't want to talk about that. But some of the lessons really are, you know, I do this because I love it. And I was a gamer, and I went to work for a game company because I just thought that was cool. You know, when I was in high school, people said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be a doctor or make video games. Turns out the doctor thing is really gross. The video game thing, not so much, and also very cool. So, and don't let inexperience stop you. I mean, I was completely unprepared for most of the jobs that I had in my career. And I work really hard, I'm really smart, I learn really fast, and you know, deal with it. So, and I say, you know, make mistakes. People are afraid to make mistakes. I am not afraid to make mistakes. In fact, seriously, fuck up hard. It's the only way you're going to learn anything. And I have done some colossal shit in my career that, like, seriously, I can't even tell you I would be deported. But that, you know, I mean, that's how you, like, the harder you make mistakes. Those are the projects that were the disastrous projects that I worked on were the projects that I learned the most from. When things go so low, the work you put into kind of pulling it all back together is just a wonderful, oh look, and someone's taking a picture. Yeah, that's great. I was so afraid to use the F word, and now she's taking a picture. Oh, I can point to it with the thing. I'm totally stealing this at the end. And when you fuck up, just try not to get caught. That's all. I mean, and I meant that like as a joke, and I realized it's actually true. The best projects that I worked on were where I really fucked things up, and then I like pulled it all back together before anybody noticed. I mean, there's a dozen things that I did that I saved where I would have got fired if anyone actually caught me. And if you get caught, just say it was like that when I got here. Seriously, blame it on the other guy. There's always a producer before you. You can be like, he did it, and I'm just trying to clean up his mess. I believe, not to insult him, but this is the philosophy of the American president right now. So he must have seen this slide. Seriously, I mean, it's true. It was the Bush guy. It was all his fault. But there was something I said I was going to talk about later, and I totally forgot. But anybody have any questions?
Yeah, that's my question. And then if we have some questions directly to Mike at the moment, then we can ask.
They told me Estonians never ask questions, so
yeah,
prove them wrong. Come on, guys.
Almost true, but not
I'm
necessarily.
afraid it should be all right. How do you find your contractors virtually, or in reality?
So I guess really 25 years of experience, just slowly collecting a Rolodex of people I worked with. And I would say, finding good people is very hard. So it's something I'm doing like, constantly, every day. I'm looking for more people. And it's really hard because you can find someone great, you work on a project, and then they want more work, and if you don't have it, they go somewhere else. And I lose people constantly because I don't always have a steady supply of work for everyone on the team. So, there's my core guys I try to keep employed constantly, but then I have some other guys that I'm just constantly shuffling in and out. So, but I network a lot. And even while I'm here, I'm networking. Game Developers Conference, I'm constantly just like trying to find programmers particularly. If anyone here is a programmer, give me your contact info. There are not enough programmers in the world. And so that's tough.
So, any other questions? Actually, I do have one. You have pitched also your projects to investors. Is it right? That's the first question.
Sure. I have, and again, put that on the list of like things that I haven't done right. When I first started the team, I pitched. The first person I pitched to said, "Whatever you want, I will give it to you. I will fund your company." And I spent 6 months. I actually didn't even write the business plan. So I was so excited that someone agreed to fund the company. I stopped all the business plan work and started negotiating terms with this person who was actually my best friend's ex-husband, right? So he was like someone I knew really well. I spent 6 months negotiating the terms of the deal. We finally came to a final term sheet, and then he was like, "No, I don't think I should do this." And so the colossal mistake there was I stopped working on the business plan, and I stopped my plans to pitch the company in a broader sense. I had a lawyer who had worked on some very, very big deals who was interested in working with me, and I just blew all that off because I got all the money right here. This guy's gonna give it to me. Like, cool, thank you. And then he just was like, "Nah, I shouldn't do this." And what I had pitched to him in 2007 was social games before Zynga. I had 3 concepts for interesting, social games, and he would have had 50% of a company that we easily could have sold to Zynga for $200 million, because what we were doing was like we were 3 years ahead of everyone else. So, oops. And then later, kind of a couple years later, when I kind of started getting more excited about what we were doing, I had a couple of investors that I pitched to. But I've kind of slowed all that down right now because I think it's a little, the mobile space is very crowded right now. And I don't have today an exciting story to tell an investor, to give me money. What I have is a steady supply of work that pays a lot of money, and I just, I do that for a year, and then I won't need investors. I'll have my own cash. So, that's the other thing. If you have your own cash, that makes everything much easier. And I encourage everyone to have rich parents. So, I don't, but if any of you do, let's talk later.
So, the thing is then that you should pitch to so many people as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, one of the mistakes that I've made throughout my career is that I'm very, very lazy. And, when things started to look good with this investor, I stopped building the business plan, which meant that when that fell apart, I wasn't prepared to start meeting other people. And it set me back by 6 months. And actually, the 2 partners that I was going to do this with, who were instrumental to making it all work, they only had 6 months of their time, and then they went off to do other things. So at that point, the whole thing, kind of fell apart. At this point, I don't stop pitching the team. Even though I'm not pitching for investors, I'm pitching for work. And even though I'm too busy right now, you got to keep pitching because it takes time for things to come together. If I don't get one more question, I'm going to call on someone. Seriously, you in the back with the purple shirt. Did you have a question, sir?
You've been here 2 days, so impressions?
This is awesome. I mean, good job coming up with a question. I am an American, and I'm a well-traveled American. I've been to Europe many times. I've been to Asia. I had not ever been to Estonia or anywhere in Eastern Europe, so I had no idea what to expect. I expected that it was still the former Soviet Union, and that I would, the KGB would question me at the airport. I was very pleasantly surprised that apparently was over 20 years ago. And the airport is beautiful. It was not what I expected. It is, in fact, nicer than any American airport I've ever been in. And then as I've been here and I walked around in this old town, it's beautiful. So very pleasantly surprised at how nice it is here. Yeah, I guess I was thinking like East Germany. That's what I thought this would be like. Like just worn down from the war or something. I don't know. Maybe there never was a war here. I don't know. But
you can travel there to eastern side or.
oh, there's a bad part?
Yeah.
Can you show me later? Because
Sure.
I take some pictures. It'd be fun to.
Yeah, but you have to travel like
300 kilometers? I thought Estonia was only like 200 kilometers. They told me I could walk to the other end of the country. I don't know if that's true or not. Again, I apologize. Like, they don't teach us any of this in school in America. They just teach us like American stuff. So.
I have one question as well.
Oh, thank you.
If you have developers all over the world,
Yes.
as I understand, what about the cultural differences? Some guy in Middle East thinks all flashing things are very nice.
Well, then when I say all over the world, that like not quite. I don't have developers in the Middle East, and I would say everyone that I work with is in one of the English-speaking countries. So I have a programmer in New Zealand. Might as well be American, right? It's pretty much the same. Some team in Scotland, and then a few people around the U.S. So culture really isn't a problem. Now we do, if I need 3D art, I have a team in China that does 3D art for us, rather cheaply. And culture is not a direct issue, but and it's very, very common to do art in China nowadays. Almost all game companies do it. Chinese art teams are not very creative, and so you have to be extremely specific about what you want. So if I want a character that looks like Marilyn Monroe, and I send them a picture of Marilyn Monroe, I will get something that looks just like that picture. But if I said, well, I want someone that looks kind of like Marilyn meets like Heidi Klum, they would just be like, can you send me a picture of what you want? So that is a cultural issue, that they're very, very good at copying things in China, but not able to kind of go beyond that. So whenever we do 3D art in China, you have to plan for like 4 or 5 revisions for each piece of art. And that is a little bit challenging. For a big project, you end up with someone full-time just managing giving comments back. But no one in the Middle East. I don't think that would work.
But what about time difference?
Time differences are a bitch. I mean, it really is. It's one of the biggest problems. So, like with China, for example, we lose a lot of time. There's a huge inefficiency because only at the end of their day do we wake up and find out that they had some question. We answer the question, but it's tomorrow for them before they see our answer. So there's a lot of time that can be lost in that situation. There's no solution to that. I'm not staying up 24 hours just because the Chinese are sleeping. But like a project I have now, which is in, the programmer is in Scotland. I mean, it's very inefficient. But there's reasons why we do it. Now for me, my two kind of main projects, the programmers are both on the same time zone. So, but I have, like for cost reasons, I have a team, in Scotland that I can go to. It's very cheap. So that's very appealing to me because if I can shave 30% off the budget, that goes in my pocket. So, and I like that.
I have a business question. What do you think about educational games? Do they have?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, so, I think that we live in a world now. When I grew up, I went to school, and if you wanted to write a paper, you went to the library, and that was the educational paradigm at that time, was books. And there was no educational anything other than books. Now, 20, 25 years later, you can give a kid an iPad with 100 educational apps, and there's so much that they can learn. Is that something that I want to do? Probably, because I'm just like the wrong person to teach anybody anything. But I think that there are people who are very successful making educational products. I don't think they're as successful as people making Angry Birds. No one's on the subway playing, learn math. But I think that it's incredible that there's a generation that's going to grow up, now that will learn things by playing with their iPad. That's great. I think the challenge is, it's like everything in America, at least, the good stuff never gets money, and I don't think that there's any VC in Silicon Valley that are sitting around and saying, we really want to give our money to somebody making educational games, let's find them. And so, it's kind of sad in a way, that if anybody here wants to invest, I know people who are making educational stuff or would like to, but it's just hard to get the money.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
There might have been another question. Why so fast? No, I'm kidding.
Is there?
These people have no questions.
Okay.
I have one more question.
See? I told you there'd be one more. I never get off the stage until it looks like all the questions have been exhausted.
Battlefield was a great game and it got brilliant reviews.
I think I said that back on slide 17. Let's go back.
Then you also told that considering sales, it was complete failure. Could you please elaborate? Why did it sell well?
But as I said, I think the marketing message was all wrong. Battlezone was a really interesting idea. There's one of the top 2 genres for PC games was real-time strategy. This was one of the most successful gaming genres of all time. And real-time strategy was always a top-down 2D thing. And we had this idea to take that and make it into a real first-person 3D experience. And we built this game, and the marketing guys decided it's like a real-time strategy game and a first-person shooter together. And they spent all their time talking about how the two genres came together. The problem is people really like one thing, they don't like two things. People really like chocolate, they really like peanut butter, they don't always like when you put those together. It's a bad example because they actually go together really well, but in this case the two genres go together really well, but that's not the marketing message. So the marketing message should have been, this is a great real-time strategy game. Yes, it's 3D, but real-time strategy was a very successful genre, but they branded it Battlezone, which is a classic game, so people thought it was just this reimagining of the classic game, which it wasn't. And they spent a lot of time talking about first-person and first-person shooters, trying to appeal to that audience. And that audience just didn't really care. And had they focused on, this is the ultimate real-time strategy game, I think that would have been a much better message. And so it sold, maybe it sold like 50, 60,000 units, but that was not really considered much of a success. So, and that genre kind of went away and never came back. But as you said, it was highly reviewed, and there are people still playing it.
So, how does it feel? Is there more questions coming?
I can't see the future.